The galaxy is full of empires that see other species as resources to be exploited. The Valorians are just one of many. When we first reached the stars, we were naive. We thought everyone would welcome us with open arms, that centuries of human conflict had prepared us to be peacemakers. His voice hardened. But some species only understand one language. Today we taught the Valorians that language. On the tactical display, Ilara watched as boarding craft from the Shadow Fleet approached the disabled Valorian vessels. In the holds of those alien ships, she knew, were the people they had taken from other colonies, other worlds. People who would soon be free. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now." Admiral Chen's voice carried something that might have been a smile. "Now we send a message to every slave-taking empire in this part of space. We tell them that humanity has declared war on slavery itself. That every harvester ship, every slave market, every auction block that deals in sentient beings will be hunted down and destroyed." Ilara looked at the massive fleet surrounding her damaged battle group, at the symbol of the broken chain that marked each hull, and understood. This wasn't just about defending one colony. This was humanity taking a stand on principle that ran deeper than survival, deeper than politics. This was about who they chose to be among the stars. "The Shadow Fleet will escort your battle group back to Terran space," Chen continued. "You and your crews fought bravely today, Commander. You held the line when any reasonable officer would have retreated. That courage saved 40,000 lives. We did what any human would do, sir." "Perhaps. But that's exactly my point." The Admiral's voice grew formal. "Commander Voss, how would you feel about a transfer? The Shadow Fleet is always looking for officers who understand what we're fighting for." Ilara looked around her battered bridge, at the crew who had followed her into impossible odds, at the view screen showing the rescued colony transports fleeing to safety. She thought about the Valerian commander's words, calling human beings cattle, primitives to be harvested. She thought about what humanity had been once before they reached the stars. Divided, warring, enslaving each other in the name of profit and power. And she thought about how they had grown, how they had learned, how they had decided that some things were worth dying for. Freedom was one of those things. "Sir," she said quietly, "I would be honored." "Good. We'll discuss details after recovery operations. For now, get your people home safe." Chin out. The transmission ended, leaving Ilara alone with her thoughts and the view of the greatest fleet humanity had ever assembled, hanging in the void like a promise. The Valorians had come to harvest slaves. Instead, they had found something they never expected. They had found humanity united by a cause that transcended borders and politics. They had found the children of Earth, grown up and armed with the weapons to back their convictions. And the galaxy would never be the same. The Declaration. 3 days after the Battle of 7 Delta, every major power in the known galaxy received the same transmission. It came through official channels and pirate frequencies alike, broadcast on every spectrum from radio to quantum entanglement. It bypassed encryption, overrode security protocols, and appeared simultaneously on 1,000 worlds. No government could block it. No empire could suppress it. The face that appeared was human, Admiral Marcus Chin, standing on the bridge of the Liberation with the symbol of the broken chain behind him. His uniform was immaculate, his posture military straight, but his eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen too much suffering and decided to do something about it. When he spoke, his words were measured, deliberate, and absolutely uncompromising. "Attention citizens of the galactic community. I am Admiral Marcus Chin of the Terran Shadow Fleet. What you are about to see is a declaration that will change the political landscape of this galaxy. We do not make it lightly. We make it because conscience demands it, and because we have the strength to enforce it." The image shifted, showing footage from 7 Delta, Valerian ships looming over the colony, cargo holds full of human captives, the harvester vessels moving with practiced efficiency. Then it showed the battle, the desperate stand of Battle Group Artemis, and the arrival of the Shadow Fleet. Finally, it showed the interior of captured Valerian ships, where thousands of beings from a dozen species huddled in cages designed for efficient transport of living cargo. Chen's face returned to the screen. For centuries, certain powers in this galaxy have treated sentient life as a commodity. They have built economies on suffering, justified atrocity with law, and hidden behind the fiction that might makes right. The Valerian Dominion is not unique in this practice. They are simply the first we encountered. He paused, letting that sink in. As of this moment, humanity formally declares that the practice of slavery in any form is an act of war against the Terran species. Any vessel engaged in the capture, transport, or sale of sentient beings will be treated as an enemy combatant. Any facility that processes slaves will be destroyed. Any government that sanctions these practices will face the full military response of the Shadow Fleet. In the council chambers of the Galactic Assembly, located on the neutral station of Archon Prime, the declaration caused immediate chaos. Ambassador Kthira of the Valerian Dominion rose from her seat, her obsidian features twisted in fury. This is an outrage. The Terran species has no authority to dictate policy to sovereign governments. They are a junior species, barely into their second century of spaceflight. But Ambassador Ralven of the Hescarii Collective, a species that had fought their own war against slavers 3,000 years ago, remained seated and silent. His multifaceted eyes watched the human transmission with something that might have been respect. On the screen, Admiral Chin continued as if he could hear every objection being raised in assembly halls across the galaxy. We understand that many of you will see this as an aggressive act. Some will call us hypocrites, pointing to humanity's own history of slavery. You would be right to do so. We do not come to you claiming moral superiority. We come to you as a species that learned the hard way that slavery corrupts both the enslaved and the enslaver, that it is a poison that infects entire civilizations. The image shifted again, showing historical footage from Earth. Slave ships crossing oceans, auction blocks, chains. Then it showed the wars fought to end it, the struggles for civil rights, the long and painful journey toward recognizing the inherent worth of every human being. We do not claim to be perfect, Chin said quietly. We claim only to have learned from our mistakes. And we refuse to stand by while others repeat them. In the command center of the Tarshan Empire, High Commander Vex Thar watched the transmission with calculating eyes. The Tarshans controlled 40% of the galactic slave trade, a fact that had made them wealthy beyond measure and untouchable by any single power. He turned to his tactical advisors. Assessment. The senior advisor, a Tarshan female named Krishan, pulled up holographic data. The Shadow Fleet appears to consist of approximately 12,000 combat vessels, including 300 capital ships and 5 Dreadnought-class platforms. Their technology is concerning. Particle weapons operating at efficiency levels we cannot match. AI combat coordination beyond our predictive models. And their industrial capacity suggests they have been building in secret for at least 15 years. Could we defeat them? Vexthar asked. Krishan hesitated. In a direct engagement? Perhaps if we committed our entire military. But the cost would be catastrophic. And there is another factor. Which is, they are not asking for territory, resources, or political power. They are fighting for an ideal. History suggests that opponents motivated by ideology are significantly more difficult to defeat than those motivated by practical concerns. Vexthar's expression darkened. An empire built on the labor of slaves could not afford to recognize them as equals. If humanity succeeded in their crusade, it would destabilize the entire Tarshan economy. But if the Tarshans went to war and lost? He turned back to the screen, where Admiral Chen was reaching the conclusion of his declaration. We offer every empire engaged in the slave trade a choice. Dismantle your systems voluntarily, release those you hold in bondage, and face no military action from Terra. Continue these practices, and you will find the Shadow Fleet at your doorstep. Chen's expression hardened, and for a moment he looked less like a diplomat and more like the warrior he truly was. Some of you are calculating right now whether you can defeat us. Some are considering alliances to crush this upstart human fleet before we become a true threat. I encourage you to consider the Battle of 7 Delta carefully. We destroyed a Valerian harvester fleet in 4 minutes. That was a fraction of our strength, against an enemy we encountered by chance. He leaned forward slightly, and his voice dropped to something quiet and absolutely lethal. Imagine what we will do when we come for you deliberately, with our full force, with time to plan and prepare. Imagine your slave markets burning. Imagine your harvester fleets scattered across the void. Imagine trying to explain to your citizens why their economy is collapsing because you insisted on treating sentient beings as property. The transmission began to close, but Chin had one final message. To those currently held in bondage across this galaxy, in the cargo holds of harvester ships, in the labor camps of industrial worlds, in the pleasure houses and fighting pits and every other place suffering is commodified, we say this: hold on. We are coming. The Terran Shadow Fleet will not rest until every chain is broken, until every cage is opened, until every being in this galaxy lives free or we die trying. The symbol of the broken chain filled the screen one final time. This is not a negotiation. This is not a request. This is a declaration of war against slavery itself. Choose your side carefully. The transmission ended, leaving a galaxy in stunned silence. In the weeks that followed, the choice became clear. Some empires, seeing the writing on the wall, began quietly releasing their slaves and dismantling their markets. They claimed it was an internal reform, a natural evolution of their society. The Shadow Fleet let them save face and moved on. Others, like the Tarshan Empire, chose defiance. They formed the Coalition for Sovereign Rights, a military alliance of slaveholding powers who saw humanity's declaration as an existential threat. They assembled fleets, fortified their positions, and prepared for war. Admiral Chin gave them 3 months to reconsider. When the deadline passed and the coalition remained defiant, the Shadow Fleet struck. Commander Ilara Voss, now captain of the heavy cruiser Unshackled, watched from her bridge as the assault on Tarsus Prime began. The Shadow Fleet had brought everything, 6,000 ships, all focused on the single most important target in the slave trade network. The orbital slave processing stations that handled millions of captives each year. The Tarshan defense fleet was massive, outnumbering the humans 2-1. They had prepared for this battle, had studied the footage from 7 Delta, had adapted their tactics. It didn't matter. The Shadow Fleet had adapted too. The AI fighters were smarter now, their coordination even more seamless. The particle weapons had been upgraded, refined by human engineers who worked with the focused intensity of people who knew what they were fighting for. And humanity had revealed another secret weapon. Dreadnoughts equipped with mass accelerators that could strike targets from beyond conventional weapons range. The Battle of Tarsus Prime lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Tarshan defense fleet was scattered wreckage, the orbital stations were in human hands, and 2 million slaves were being evacuated to freedom. Captain Voss stood on the Unshackled's bridge and watched as transport after transport left the stations, each one carrying beings who had thought they would die in chains. Humans, yes, but also Hescarii, Valorians, even some young Tarshans who had been sold into slavery by their own people for debt or crime. The Iron Tide. The battle had raged for 17 minutes, and the void was littered with debris from both sides. Commander Voss gripped the armrest of her chair as another Valerian plasma bolt scorched past the Defiant's starboard hull, close enough that she could see the afterglow through the reinforced viewports. Her ship was holding but barely. 2 of her destroyers were gone, vaporized in the opening salvo. Another was venting atmosphere, limping back toward the rear of the formation with half its crew dead or dying. But the Valorians were bleeding too. 3 of their harvester ships hung dead in space, their elegant hulls torn open by concentrated railgun fire. Their fighter screen had been reduced to scattered survivors, and the capital ship that had nearly destroyed the Defiant was trailing plasma from a ruptured engine core. The aliens were still winning, still held the numerical advantage, but they had stopped treating the humans as an inconvenience. Now they fought with the focused intensity of predators who had found unexpected fangs in their prey. "Commander, the colony is evacuating," Chin called out, her voice hoarse from shouting over the cacophony of battle. "They're getting transports off the surface." Ilara allowed herself one moment of relief. That was why they were here. Every second they held this line was another transport full of families escaping into the dark. "Keep them covered. Route all point defense to protect those transports." "Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission," the comm officer said. It's not from the Valorians." Ilara's eyes snapped to him. "Source. Unknown. It's coming from deeper in-system beyond the gas giant. They're requesting secure channel." Every instinct screamed trap, but Ilara had learned long ago that battles weren't won by playing it safe. "Put them through." The voice that came through was human, male, and carried an accent Ilara recognized as coming from the Jovian colonies. But there was something else in it, an edge of controlled fury that made her spine straighten. "Battle Group Artemis, this is Admiral Marcus Chin of the TSS Liberation. We've been monitoring your engagement. Hold your position for 90 seconds. Help is arriving." Ilara's mind raced. Admiral Chin, the name was legend in military circles, the architect of the Titan Rebellion, the man who had disappeared into Black Ops work 15 years ago with an entire battle group that had been declared lost in deep space. If the stories were true, he commanded humanity's Shadow Fleet, the ships that operated beyond official channels, hunting threats the civilian government never knew existed. "Admiral, we're taking heavy fire. I'm not sure we have 90 seconds. Then make it 80. Chin out." The transmission cut off, leaving Ilara staring at the tactical display. Around her, the bridge crew exchanged glances, uncertainty written on their faces. But Lieutenant Chin, no relation to the Admiral, suddenly gasped and pointed at her sensor station. "Commander. Contacts emerging from FTL. Multiple signatures bearing 315 Mark 7. The tactical display exploded with new icons. Not dozens. Not hundreds. Thousands. They came out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, a tsunami of steel and fury that filled the space between stars. Battleships that dwarfed anything in the Terran defense fleet. Carriers disgorging fighter wings that numbered in the hundreds. Destroyers, frigates, cruisers, an entire armada that had been hidden from the galaxy, waiting in the dark places between worlds. At their head was the Liberation, a dreadnought so massive it had its own gravitational field, its hull painted in the black and silver of Earth's united fleet, but marked with a symbol that made Alara's breath catch, a broken chain wrapped around a clenched fist. The Valorians saw them too. On the view screen, Alara watched their formations falter, watched their ships hesitate as their sensors tried to process what they were seeing. She could imagine the confusion in their elegant command centers, the dawning realization that they had not encountered some primitive species with a handful of warships. They had kicked a sleeping giant. Admiral Chen's voice filled every speaker in both fleets, broadcast on every frequency, in every known language, amplified until it seemed to shake the very fabric of space. Attention Valerian Dominion forces. This is Admiral Marcus Chen of the Terran Shadow Fleet. You have violated sovereign human territory. You have attacked our colonies. You have attempted to enslave our people. A pause heavy with promise. This ends now. The Shadow Fleet opened fire. It was not a battle. It was an execution. Weapons that humanity had spent decades developing in secret, away from prying eyes and galactic treaties they had never signed, weapons designed for a single purpose, to ensure that humanity would never again be at anyone's mercy. Particle beams that could boil away shields in seconds. Missiles with AI guidance systems that could outthink point defense. Railguns accelerated by artificial gravity wells that hit with the force of small meteors. And something else. Something the Valorians had no defense against because they had never imagined it possible. The fighters that poured from the Shadow Fleet carriers weren't manned by pilots who could black out or die. They were flown by AI, by digital minds that had been born in the fires of human desperation and coded with a singular directive: protect humanity at all costs. They moved with impossible precision, coordinating attacks across hundreds of craft simultaneously, learning and adapting with every microsecond of combat. The Valerian capital ship that had nearly destroyed the Defiant lasted 18 seconds under concentrated fire from 3 Shadow Fleet battleships before its shields failed and its hull came apart like tissue paper. Alara watched in stunned silence as the battle turned into a rout. The Valerian ships tried to retreat, tried to scatter, but the Shadow Fleet had already cut off every escape vector. They were boxed in, surrounded by an enemy that had materialized from nowhere with overwhelming force. All Valerian vessels, power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Admiral Chen's voice boomed across the void. Surrender and you will be treated according to the conventions of war. Resist and you will share the fate of your flagship. For a moment nothing happened. Then one by one the Valerian ships went dark. Power signatures dropped. Weapons systems disengaged. The proud warriors of the Dominion, who had swept across a dozen sectors harvesting primitives for their slave markets, lowered their heads in defeat. The last transport from Colony 7 Delta cleared the atmosphere and jumped to safety. Alara realized she was shaking. Not from fear or adrenaline, but from the sheer magnitude of what she had just witnessed. The entire engagement, from the moment the Shadow Fleet arrived to the Valerian surrender, had lasted less than 4 minutes. Commander Voss, this is Admiral Chen. Stand down from combat alert and begin recovery operations for your damaged vessels. The Shadow Fleet will handle custody of the Valorians. Alara found her voice. Admiral, where did all these ships come from? There was a pause, and when Chen spoke again, his voice was quieter, meant only for her. Commander, for 15 years we've been preparing for this day. We've been building in secret shipyards in the outer dark, recruiting from volunteers who understood that the galaxy is not a kind place. We've been watching and waiting for the moment when humanity would need more than optimism and good intentions to survive among the stars. He paused again, and Alara could hear the weight of decisions made in darkness, of choices that would never appear in history books. The arrival of the Slaver Armada. The void between stars had always been silent, but on this day, it screamed. Commander Alara Voss stood on the bridge of the Terran Defiant, her hands clasped behind her back, eyes fixed on the holographic display that painted the darkness ahead in shades of amber and crimson. The alerts had been coming in for hours now, distress signals, garbled transmissions, the digital ghosts of colonies going dark one by one along the outer rim. The pattern was unmistakable. Someone was hunting. Commander, we're picking up another signal. Lieutenant Chen's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Colony 7 Delta. They're under attack. Elara didn't flinch. She had served in the Terran Defense Fleet for 15 years, had seen her share of pirate raids and territorial disputes, but this felt different. The attacks were too coordinated, too systematic. Whoever was behind this wasn't interested in resources or territory. They were taking people. How long until we reach their position? She asked. 18 minutes at current speed. Push the engines. Get us there in 12. The Defiant lurched forward, its fusion drives burning white-hot as it tore through the black. Around them, the rest of Battle Group Artemis followed, 8 destroyers, 3 cruisers and 2 support carriers. It wasn't the largest force humanity had ever assembled, but it was what they had in range. Would have to be enough. The bridge crew worked in focused silence, each officer aware that they were racing against a clock they couldn't see. Colony 7 Delta was home to 40,000 souls. Miners, engineers, families who had carved out a life on a frozen moon at the edge of known space. If the fleet arrived too late, those people would be gone. Commander, we're approaching the system now, Chin reported. Dropping out of FTL in 3, 2. Reality snapped back into focus with a violent shudder. The Defiant emerged from faster-than-light travel, and the view screen filled with a sight that made Elara's blood run cold. The colony was burning. No, not burning, being harvested. Massive ships loomed over the moon's surface, their hulls sleek and predatory, painted in colors that seemed to drink the light. They were unlike anything in Terran records, their design all sharp angles and cruel efficiency. Dozens of smaller craft swarmed between them and the surface, ferrying cargo that Elara knew with sick certainty wasn't Auror equipment. My God, Chin whispered. Elara's jaw tightened. Battle stations. All ships, combat formation Delta. Weapons hot. The fleet responded instantly, years of training overriding the shock of what they were witnessing. The destroyers spread out in a defensive screen while the cruisers moved to firing positions. On the moon below, Elara could see the colony's defensive batteries still firing, desperate bursts of energy that splashed uselessly against the invaders' shields. Hail them, Elara ordered. All frequencies. The comm officer worked quickly then nodded. A moment later, the view screen flickered and changed. The face that appeared was humanoid but distinctly alien, skin like polished obsidian, eyes that glowed with an inner light, features sharp and aristocratic. When it spoke, the translation matrix rendered its words with unsettling clarity. Primitive vessels, you trespass on a sanctioned harvesting operation of the Valerian Dominion. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. Harvesting operation. The words were clinical, sterile. As if the 40,000 human beings below were nothing more than crops to be gathered. Elara stepped forward, her voice steady and cold. This is Commander Elara Voss of the Terran Defense Fleet. You are attacking a human colony in sovereign Terran space. Cease your operations immediately and release all captives, or we will open fire. The alien's expression didn't change, but something in its glowing eyes suggested amusement. Terran? We have no record of your species claiming this sector. These primitives are unaffiliated and therefore subject to acquisition under Dominion law. Your interference is noted and will be reported. This is your final warning, withdraw. No. The word hung in the space between them, simple and absolute. The alien tilted its head as if considering an interesting specimen. You would sacrifice your ships for these cattle? How curious. Very well. Let this be a lesson your species will not forget. The transmission cut off. Commander, they're powering weapons. Chin shouted. Multiple targeting locks. They're aiming for us and the colony both. Elara's mind raced through tactical scenarios in microseconds. They were outnumbered, outgunned, facing technology they didn't understand. Every logical analysis said they should retreat, regroup, bring back reinforcements. But logic didn't account for the 40,000 people below who would be gone by then. Logic didn't account for what it meant to be human. All ships, she said quietly, her voice carrying to every bridge in the battle group. We hold this line. Not one more human being gets taken today. Not one. Commander, they're launching fighters, the tactical officer called out. 50, 80, over 100 contacts. The Valerian attack craft swarmed forward like locusts, their weapons already glowing with lethal intent. Behind them, the larger ships began to move, their massive guns tracking the human fleet with mechanical precision. Elara watched them come, watched death approach in a wave of alien steel and arrogance, and she smiled. It was not a kind smile. Fire. The Defiant unleashed hell. Human railguns, crude by galactic standards but refined through centuries of warfare, spat streams of hypervelocity projectiles into the void. Missile pods opened like flowers of destruction, sending smart munitions screaming toward their targets. The other ships of Battle Group Artemis added their own fury to the barrage, and space itself seemed to tear apart under the onslaught. The Valerian fighters hit the wall of fire and died. Not all of them, their shields were good, their pilots skilled, but enough. Dozens of alien craft simply ceased to exist, vaporized by the sheer volume of ordnance the humans had thrown into their path. The survivors scattered, their formation broken, their confidence shaken. On the view screen, Ilara watched as one of the larger Valerian ships turned its attention fully toward the Defiant. She could see its main gun charging, a weapon that could probably crack a moon given time. Evasive maneuvers. All power to forward shields. The Defiant twisted in space, dancing like a ship a tenth its size, but the Valerian gun tracked them with inevitable precision. The weapon fired. The impact felt like the hand of an angry god. The bridge lights flickered, alarms shrieked, and Ilara was thrown against her command chair with bone-jarring force. Through the chaos, she heard Chin shouting damage reports, heard the tactical officer coordinating return fire, heard the screams of injured crew from somewhere below. But the Defiant was still flying. Still fighting. Return fire. Target their propulsion systems. I want that ship crippled. The human cruisers concentrated their fire on the Valerian capital ship, hammering its shields with everything they had. The aliens were powerful, yes, but they had made a crucial mistake. They had assumed the humans would run. They had underestimated what humanity was willing to sacrifice. They had forgotten that humans had been slaves once too. And they had fought a war to end it. As the battle raged, as human ships traded blows with an enemy that thought them primitive and weak, something was happening that the Valorians couldn't see. Deep in the holds of the Defiant and her sister ships, other systems were powering up. Systems that weren't on any official manifest. Systems that humanity had kept secret, kept dark, waiting for the moment they would be needed. That moment had arrived. And the Valorians were about to learn a very old human truth. We do not go quietly into anyone's chains. Not anymore. Not ever again.